My name's Asher. I'm 28 now, but for most of my life, I didn't feel like the main character in my own family. If anything, I felt like a background prop, useful only when convenient, forgotten the rest of the time. My dad made that clear from as early as I can remember. He used to say things like, "You've got a good heart, Asher, but your brother, he's got that spark, that drive. You're just different." And by different, he meant disappointing. Of course, he never used that exact word, but it hung in the air between us during every dinner, every school event, every silent car ride. It was always clear that no matter what I did, I wasn't the son he was proud of. That title belonged to Noah. Noah was 2 years older than me, and my dad made sure the entire world knew he was his golden child. Varsity athlete? Check. Class president? Naturally. Ivy League acceptance? Obviously. Even when Noah got caught sneaking alcohol into prom and spent a night in the drunk tank, my dad brushed it off as a youthful mistake and chuckled about it over dinner. When I brought home straight A's and an art scholarship to a decent university, he barely looked up from his newspaper. "Is that going to pay the bills?" he muttered. That was the closest thing to praise I ever got. Mom tried to play peacemaker, but even she defaulted to making excuses for Dad. "He just sees potential in you both differently," she'd say, which, in our house, meant he doesn't see yours at all. I learned early on not to compete with Noah. Any attempt was met with rolled eyes, or worse, that disappointed sigh my dad had mastered like an Olympic event. So I stopped trying. I stopped showing him my drawings, stopped inviting him to school exhibits, stopped asking for his opinion. I shrank into myself and found comfort in the background. But life has a funny way of twisting paths, especially the ones you think are set in stone. It didn't happen overnight, but slowly, brick by brick, I built something of my own, something real. I didn't follow Noah into law school or finance. Instead, I leaned into design, started small doing logos and illustrations for local businesses, then freelanced my way into some big contracts. By 26, I'd founded a boutique creative agency that landed its first $1 million year while still running out of a co-working space. I reinvested, grew my team, moved into a proper office downtown, and built a brand people actually recognized. Still, I didn't tell my family much. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I knew they wouldn't care. It wasn't bitterness back then, not yet. It was more like self-protection. I didn't want to give them another thing to ignore or mock. I still visited for holidays, showed up for birthdays, played my role as the quiet, dependable one. Noah, meanwhile, had taken over Dad's firm and was already getting groomed for a managing partner role. At family dinners, Dad would beam at him across the table while I refilled drinks or made jokes that no one laughed at. I was invisible, but at least I was safe. Or so I thought. The first real crack in the illusion came during a Thanksgiving dinner 2 years ago. We were at my parents' house, the same beige, overly symmetrical suburban home I'd grown up in, and Noah had brought along his fiancée, Claire. She was lovely, honestly. Sharp, well-spoken, and far too kind for someone marrying into that family. I'd chatted with her a bit over appetizers, and, surprisingly, she'd asked a lot of questions about my work. Real questions, not the fake polite kind. When I explained some of the branding work I'd done for a startup that had just gotten acquired, her eyes widened. "Wait, are you talking about Cardea?" she asked, setting down her glass of wine. "Yeah," I said, taken aback. "We did their rebrand right before they got that Series B funding." She looked genuinely impressed. "That's amazing. My friend works there. They talk about your agency all the time." I blinked. No one at that table had ever spoken that way about my job before. Before I could respond, Dad chimed in from across the room. "Asher's little art projects keep him busy," he said with a smirk. "Better than playing video games all day, I guess." Claire looked confused. "Art projects? I thought you said." "Noah, how's the merger going?" Dad interrupted, completely ignoring her. And just like that, the spotlight shifted back to his favorite. That night, I left early. I said I had a deadline to hit, which wasn't true, but I couldn't sit there and watch my father belittle me in front of someone who actually seemed to respect what I did. I remember driving home in silence, gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual, that old feeling creeping back in. Like no matter how far I'd come, to them I'd always be that second-rate, soft-spoken disappointment. I wish I could say that was the moment I decided to cut them off. But I didn't. Not yet. Part of me still clung to the hope that maybe one day they'd see me, really see me. That maybe something would change. The next time I saw them was 6 months later at Noah and Claire's wedding. I had flown in from a business conference just the night before, wearing a custom-tailored suit I could actually afford now. My agency had just signed a national campaign deal, and while I didn't flaunt it, I felt good, confident for once. Claire greeted me with a big hug and whispered, "Your speech at the summit was amazing, by the way." I watched the recording. My dad, he barely looked at me all night. But when he did, he leaned in close and said, "Don't embarrass yourself trying to act like you belong here, Asher." I froze. My champagne glass almost slipped from my hand. He smiled like it was a joke, but his eyes? Cold, dismissive. The same look he used to give me when I'd get picked last for basketball or come home without a trophy. I laughed it off, told myself I was overreacting. But deep down, something broke. Not in a dramatic, movie-worthy way. More like a quiet snap, the kind you don't notice until the silence that follows feels different. I didn't return his call that Christmas, or the one after New Year's. I skipped the next family gathering entirely. Mom texted, worried. Noah emailed once, but I didn't respond. I wasn't angry. I was done. And then, just a few weeks ago, he showed up. It was a Wednesday, mid-afternoon. I was reviewing a storyboard with my creative team when my assistant poked her head in, looking puzzled. "There's a man in the lobby asking for you. Says he's your father." I stared at her. He didn't have an appointment, but he said it was important. I walked out to the lobby, and there he was, smaller than I remembered. His suit was wrinkled, his tie slightly loose, like he'd thrown it on in a hurry. For a second, he didn't see me. Then he looked up, and when our eyes met, he didn't say hello. He took a step forward, lowered his voice, and whispered, "Please." I didn't know it would turn out like this. He stood there in my lobby, older and smaller than I remembered, like a man who had been shrinking for years and only now realized he couldn't fit into the world he built. I hadn't seen him in person in over a year, and yet, somehow, I felt nothing. No hate, no longing, no satisfaction, just emptiness. "Please." "I didn't know it would turn out like this," he whispered again, as if we were in some hospital room and not the lobby of the company he never believed I could build. My receptionist looked between us, unsure whether to step in. I gave her a slight nod, and she quietly stepped away. I didn't say anything at first, just stared at him. I could see the panic rising in his eyes, like he had shown up with a script in his head, and I wasn't following it. "You came all the way here to say that," I finally said. He swallowed hard. "Can we talk?" "Privately." I led him to a small meeting room down the hall. Not my main office, not somewhere important, just neutral ground. I didn't offer him water. He sat, shoulders hunched, and looked like a man who'd spent his whole life giving orders and didn't know how to ask for help. I leaned back in the chair across from him and waited. "There's some trouble at the firm," he began. "Noah's been." He stopped, choosing his next words carefully. "Let's just say he made some unfortunate decisions." A bitter laugh almost escaped me. Of course, he wasn't here for me. He was here because something broke, and his golden son couldn't fix it. What does that have to do with me? "I know you're doing well now. More than well. Claire told me about the campaign you launched. The billboards. The award thing." "The Clio," I said flatly. "International Design Award." "Yeah." He nodded quickly, like he wanted credit for knowing the name. "I was wondering if, maybe, you'd consider meeting with Noah, offering some advice. Maybe even helping out." I blinked. "Help Noah?" He fumbled, realizing how that sounded. "I just mean this family. We're all we've got, Asher. We have to stick together." I stood. "That was enough. You spent my entire life making sure I wasn't part of this family," I said. "You picked your winner before the race even started, and now that he's tripped, you come running to the one you ignored?" "Asher, I didn't mean it that way." "No," I said, cutting him off. "You meant it exactly that way." And with that, I left the room, told my assistant to escort him out. But that wasn't the breaking point. Not yet. That came 2 weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon, when I got a call from my mom, and she was crying. Mom rarely called me. She was more of a text and emoji kind of communicator, usually sending group family photos and passive-aggressive reminders like, "It would be nice to see you more," smiley face. She never called. And she never cried. "Asher, honey, please." I didn't know who else to call. "Your brother, he's been arrested." That snapped me to attention. "What? Arrested for what?" She hesitated. "Embezzlement. Fraud. I don't understand all of it. Something about the firm's accounts. They said he forged a signature. Several, actually. And your father, he's trying to get ahead of it. But Asher, they froze everything. Our savings, the firm's accounts, even the retirement fund. I sat down, staring at the blank wall across from me. Suddenly, things made more sense. My dad showing up at my office. His sudden humility. This was the fallout. Noah had imploded, and the debris was hitting everyone in its path. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said, meaning it. "That's awful." Then came the words that truly changed everything. "We might lose the house," she whispered. "Your father's been asking if there's any way you can help. Just temporarily. A loan. A cosign. Something." We didn't know how bad things were. We trusted him. And there it was. After a lifetime of being invisible, suddenly I was useful. I told her I needed time to think. I didn't sleep that night. I kept picturing the house I grew up in, the one where my dad ignored every drawing I ever showed him, where Noah mocked me for my quiet voice and soft personality, where birthdays felt more like performance reviews. I imagined that kitchen table where I once overheard Dad say, "We only have the money for one kid's college fund, and we both know who needs it more." He wasn't wrong. Noah got that fund. I took student loans and worked weekends designing wedding invitations for strangers. And now they wanted my help. With the very thing they'd once told me I'd never understand, success. I didn't give an answer. I didn't call them back. A week later, I got another call, this time from Claire. She sounded shaken. She apologized for calling, said she wouldn't bother me, but she wanted me to know something. "Your father is blaming you, Asher." I frowned. Blaming me for what? For not stepping in. For letting Noah take the fall alone. "He told my parents that you've been hoarding success and refusing to help your family when it matters most." That hit like a slap. I hadn't said a word publicly. Hadn't made any moves. And yet, somehow, I was being painted as the villain. He's losing it," Claire added quietly. "He's angry. He keeps saying, 'Asher thinks he's better than us now. I don't think it's safe for you to come around.'" I thanked her. Hung up. That night, I drove past their house. I didn't stop. Just parked a block away and watched the lights inside. The windows I used to stare out of, wondering what it would be like to be someone else's kid. I thought about the version of me that had stayed quiet for so long. The version that let everything slide. But something had changed. I wasn't that kid anymore. And they were about to find out just how much I had grown. The real betrayal came soon after. I got an email from a law firm I'd never heard of, requesting a financial disclosure. Apparently, my parents had listed me as a financial guarantor for a second mortgage they took out, without telling me. They used my name, my credit, forged my signature, dated back to the year I'd just started my company and was too busy to even open my physical mail. They'd done it quietly, likely assuming I'd never notice. And now, with everything falling apart, the debt had surfaced. I was stunned. I sat there staring at the document. My own name, scrawled in a handwriting close enough to mine that someone might believe it. They hadn't even asked. I confronted them. My dad didn't even deny it. "You owed us that much," he said flatly. "We fed you, raised you. You wouldn't be where you are without us." It was the first time I'd heard those words. And they didn't feel like pride. They felt like a bill. "You stole from me," I said quietly. "You're rich. You'll survive." And that's when I snapped. Not with anger, not with shouting, but with something far colder. Clarity. He didn't love me. He never did. He loved the version of me that would always be beneath him, the one he could control. And now that I had something of my own, I wasn't his son. I was an asset, a resource, a line of credit. That night, I contacted a lawyer. I handed over every document, every voicemail, every forged signature. I wasn't just going to protect myself. I was going to show them, all of them, what it felt like to be invisible, to be underestimated, to be treated like nothing, and then watched as that nothing became everything they feared. But I wasn't ready to strike yet, because the best revenge is patient. And the moment I saw the opportunity to twist the knife, I took it. And it all started with an invitation. An elegant white envelope slid into their mailbox, sealed in gold, with my company's logo embossed in the corner. I'll be honest, when I first found out about the forged mortgage, I wasn't thinking clearly. I wasn't even angry in the way you'd expect. I didn't throw things. I didn't scream into a pillow. I just sat there, in my apartment, lights off, phone silent, staring at my name on a contract I didn't sign. It was like someone had put a gun to my credit score and pulled the trigger while smiling to my face. I kept thinking, this can't be real. But it was. And the fallout hit fast. When I finally met with my lawyer the next morning, I remember the way he looked at me. Calm, professional, but with that glint of surprise in his eyes. Like even he didn't expect a family dispute to come with forged documents and bank loans. I handed him everything I had. The email from the firm, the photocopies of the signatures, my own financial records. He listened. He took notes. And then he asked the one question I hadn't prepared for. Asher, are you planning to pursue criminal charges? I froze. Up until that moment, I hadn't even considered that route. Suing them? Sure. Getting my name removed from the loan? Absolutely. But jail time? For my father? My gut reaction was no. Of course not. He was still my dad, right? But then I thought back to his voice on the phone, cold and smug. You owed us that much. I thought about all the years I spent trying to earn his approval, shrinking myself, hiding my wins, dimming my light so Noah could shine brighter. I thought about the loans I took out for college, the time he laughed when I said I wanted to be a designer, the years I kept my distance because every conversation felt like walking into a buzzsaw. And now, after all that, he'd stolen from me, lied, betrayed me, risked my company, my reputation, my entire life, and didn't even flinch when I found out. That was when I knew. I wasn't doing this for revenge anymore. I was doing it to protect myself. I looked my lawyer in the eye and said, do whatever it takes to get my name off that loan. If charges have to be filed, so be it. And with that, things started to spiral. The next few months were the worst of my life. I lost sleep. I lost weight. I lost focus. Even though the agency was still running, we hadn't lost a single client. I started pulling back, delegating more, trusting my team to handle things while I dealt with lawyers, courts, and sleepless nights filled with panic attacks and what-ifs. I kept things quiet at work. Only my assistant and my co-founder, Maya, knew the full story. Everyone else just thought I was taking time off for family stuff. But I was crumbling. One day I walked into the office and overheard two junior designers whispering in the break room. Something about how I wasn't around much anymore, and maybe he's burning out. They weren't wrong. I was burning out, and I hated that they could see it. I started avoiding mirrors. I stopped checking my emails. I even skipped a client event I had planned for months, just because the thought of putting on a smile and pretending everything was fine made me want to vomit. Then came the phone calls. Dozens of them. From Mom. From Dad. From unknown numbers I suspected were theirs. Sometimes Claire would text me just to check in, gently, as if afraid she'd scare me away. I appreciated her, but I couldn't respond. I was numb. Every time my phone lit up, it felt like a bomb waiting to go off. And then, one night, I cracked. It was 2 a.m. I was lying on the floor of my apartment, scrolling through legal documents on my phone like some kind of masochist. That's when I saw it. An update from the county clerk. My lawyer had successfully filed a claim against the mortgage company. A formal investigation was underway. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt like I was going to throw up. That's when I finally called someone. Not my lawyer. Not Maya. I called my old college roommate, Ben. He picked up groggy. Asher, I think I'm losing it, I whispered. He didn't ask questions. He just said, I'll be there in 20. When he showed up, he didn't lecture me. Didn't offer empty advice or awkward pep talks. He just sat next to me, cracked open a beer, and watched dumb YouTube videos with me until sunrise. That was the first time I'd laughed in weeks. And that's when I realized I had people, not the ones I grew up with, but the ones I chose. That moment marked the start of the climb back up. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't easy, but it was real. I started showing up to work again, not just physically, but present. I started having real conversations with my team. I took Maya out for coffee and told her everything. She didn't judge me. She just said, I've got your back. We've got your back. And I believed her. I even started therapy, something I never thought I'd do. My therapist was this soft-spoken woman named Dr. Lane who looked like she could knock someone out with a stare. She didn't waste time on small talk. First session, she asked, when did you first feel invisible? And I just broke down crying. Every week, we peeled back another layer. My childhood, the favoritism, the silent dinners, the way my father weaponized disappointment like a tool. She helped me name things I'd buried for years: emotional neglect, covert narcissism, trauma responses. It was brutal, but it was freeing. I stopped blaming myself for not being the favorite. I stopped minimizing what had happened. I started believing that my success wasn't luck, it was mine. Earned. Fought for. And slowly, I started reclaiming parts of myself. I picked up painting again. Just for fun. No clients. No deadlines. Just me, a canvas, and some old acrylics I hadn't touched in years. I'd put on jazz, sip tea, and lose myself in color. For the first time in forever, I wasn't creating for approval. I was creating for me. I also made peace with something important. I would probably never get an apology. Not a real one. Not from my dad. Not from Noah. Maybe not even from my mom. They weren't wired that way. But I didn't need their apology to move forward. I just needed distance. And so I took it. I changed my number. Blocked theirs. Put a legal team on retainer to handle the mortgage fraud case. I gave them my blessing to pursue restitution, but not to keep me updated. I didn't want to hear about court dates or depositions. I wanted to live. And I did. My agency grew, bigger than I ever imagined. We landed a contract with a Fortune 100 company. Our rebrand for a global wellness brand went viral. We opened a second office in Austin, and people started talking. Suddenly, I was getting invited to panels, podcasts, 30 under 30 lists. Strangers recognized me at coffee shops. Clients quoted my TEDx talk back to me. My inbox turned into a flood of speaking invites and brand offers. And through it all, I stayed grounded, focused, because I remembered the nights I cried on the floor, the forged mortgage, the empty birthday chairs, the subtle digs that weren't subtle at all. Those things didn't break me. They built me, brick by brick, scar by scar. And then one day, about a year after that first whisper in the lobby, please, I didn't know it would turn out like this. I got an email from Claire. Subject line, you need to see this. Attached was a photo, a small, formal letter, black text on ivory paper, embossed in gold, my company's logo in the top corner. The same invitation I'd sent to my clients, my team, my friends. But this one had been addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Edwin Hart, my parents, and they had RSVP'd. Claire's caption underneath, they're coming. And that's when I knew it was time, not to hurt them, but to show them what they threw away, to show them the sun they never really knew, and to let the world see what happens when you try to bury someone too deep, and they bloom anyway. The event was just days away, and I had something very, very special planned. The gala was my idea. We were celebrating the 5th anniversary of my agency, a sleek, black-tie event in a converted art museum downtown, all glass ceilings and soft lighting, and just enough jazz to make people feel important. But the truth? This night wasn't about the company. Not really. It was about me. More specifically, it was about them seeing me. And not the Asher they remembered. Not the quiet, forgettable kid sitting at the edge of the dinner table, ignored in his own home. This Asher stood in a custom midnight blue suit, tie subtle but sharp, posture straight, eyes steady. This Asher didn't need their validation. But he was going to take their silence and make them listen. The invitations had gone out months before. Elegant, understated, meant for friends, clients, investors, even press. But I'd made sure 2 envelopes were hand-delivered, not emailed, not mailed, but delivered by a courier in a black blazer, right to the doorstep of the home I once grew up in. One was addressed to Mr. Edwin Hart and Mrs. Marion Hart. The other, smaller, less formal, was for Noah and Claire Hart. Both bore the same golden seal. The invite read, Asher Hart cordially invites you to an evening celebrating vision, resilience, and creative brilliance. This is not just a party. This is a moment. Dress accordingly. No RSVP necessary. The kind of line that either screams arrogance or confidence, depending on where you stand. They showed up. Of course they did. I designed the entire night knowing they would. The setup began long before the event, in whispers, in briefings, in unspoken conversations behind closed doors. First, I gathered my allies. Maya, my co-founder, was the first. She'd known the bones of the story for months, had been there through the sleepless nights and court filings. But I finally sat her down and told her everything. The favoritism, the mortgage fraud, the forged signature, the confrontation. When I was done, she didn't speak right away. She just looked at me for a long time and said, then let's give them a night they'll never forget. We had coffee the next morning with Jamie, our head of communications, and a ruthless strategist when she wanted to be. I told her the theme I wanted to weave into the event. Not revenge, not rage, resilience, growth, emergence. Like a phoenix, she said, sipping her latte. No, I replied. Like a volcano. Quiet, until it's not. And so we built it. The night would unfold in 3 acts, a narrative disguised as a gala. Music, lighting, video, spoken word. Every touch carefully designed to tell a story. Act 1, Foundation. The early struggles of the company. Humble beginnings, small wins, hard lessons. Video reels of our first logo design sketches. Photos of me at 22 pulling all-nighters in a shoebox apartment. Audio bites from our interns talking about what they learned under my mentorship. Act 2, Fire. The rise. The first big client. The turning point contract. Media clips. Viral campaigns. Even a cameo from a few celebrities who'd endorsed our work. Lights would flash warm gold here. Growth, glory, recognition. The music would swell, jazzy and smooth. And then, Act 3, Rebirth. This was where things got personal. I would step onto the stage myself. No teleprompter. No prepared notes. Just me in a single spotlight. I would tell my story, not by naming names or dragging my family publicly, but by reclaiming the narrative they tried to bury. I'd talk about being told I wasn't built for success. I'd talk about finding my voice in silence. About turning pain into purpose. About how some people break you, and some people just show you how strong you've been all along. I wouldn't say Dad, or Noah, or family. But I wouldn't need to. They'd know. The room would know. And best of all, they would be in the audience. There was one more piece to set in motion, the financial twist. After months of work, my legal team had reached a settlement with the mortgage company. The forged loan had been discharged, the debt canceled, and my credit fully restored. But the investigation into how it happened was still ongoing, and both my parents had been formally notified. I hadn't told them. I wanted them to find out at the event. And I knew exactly how. Each guest would receive a gift bag on their way out. Mostly harmless, a curated box of branded goodies, artisan chocolates, a printed art piece from one of our campaigns. But for 2 bags, only 2, there would be an extra envelope tucked inside. Inside was a copy of the notarized discharge papers, stamped with the phrase, forged, void, resolved, and underneath it, a single note, handwritten in my neatest script. Funny how the truth always finds its way out. Enjoy the party. That envelope would go to them. The night of the event arrived like a storm I'd been preparing for my whole life. The venue was packed, over 300 guests, many in designer suits and dresses, sipping champagne beneath hanging lights and velvet banners embossed with our logo. Waiters passed around hors d'oeuvres that cost more per tray than I used to make in a week. A jazz trio played near the entrance, giving the room a cinematic hum. And then I saw them. My parents. He wore an old tux that probably hadn't been tailored since Noah's graduation. She clutched a handbag with white knuckles, her eyes darting around the room like she didn't quite believe where she was. And trailing just behind them, Noah and Claire. He looked thinner, worn out. His eyes darted across the space like he was looking for someone to blame. Claire, on the other hand, spotted me almost immediately. She smiled. A small, knowing smile. I gave her a nod. Neither of us said anything. They took their seats toward the back, among the general guests. I'd made sure their names weren't on the VIP list. If they noticed, they didn't say anything. The lights dimmed. Act 1 began. Footage played across the giant LED screen. Photos of our first office space, a single table crammed between a laundromat and a frozen yogurt shop. Clips of Maya and I brainstorming late into the night. A reel of our earliest branding attempts. Ugly, clumsy, full of hope. The audience laughed in the right places, applauded in others. Act 2 came fast, vibrant, loud, inspiring. Testimonials from major clients. Global ad spots we had spearheaded. A slow-motion clip of our team cheering after hitting our 100th campaign milestone. The music pulsed. The lights warmed. The energy soared. And then the screen went dark. Silence. A single spotlight lit up the stage. I walked out, took a breath, looked straight ahead, and spoke. I was told once that I wasn't built for success, that someone else was, that I should accept my place in the background. And for a long time, I did. The room fell still. But the funny thing about being ignored is that you learn to listen. You learn to observe. You learn to build in the quiet. And when no one's watching, when no one believes in you, you find out who you are. Not who they expect you to be, who you choose to be. My voice never shook. I had practiced this speech 100 times. But tonight, it was real. I want to thank every single person who stood with me when no one else did. Every teammate, every client, every friend who believed in something before it had a name. You didn't just help me build a company. You helped me reclaim my voice. There were nods. A few people wiped their eyes. I don't believe in revenge, I said, and let that hang for a beat. I believe in transformation. And sometimes, the best transformation is simply showing up again and again until the world has to pay attention. The audience rose. Applause shook the room. And in the back row, I saw them. My father, stone-faced. My mother, blinking rapidly. Noah, jaw clenched. Claire? She was crying. As the crowd settled and the lights returned, waiters began handing out the final gift bags. I watched them. I saw my father take his. My mother hers. They didn't open it at first. Not until they reached the lobby. And when they did, when his hands pulled out that ivory envelope and unfolded the stamped discharge letter, I saw it. That moment, that flicker of realization, of panic, of understanding that I knew everything, and that I'd won. I watched him open the envelope. The lights in the lobby were dim now, most of the guests laughing and spilling out onto the street under the warm glow of downtown. The valet line had started forming outside. Glasses clinked. Jazz hummed faintly through the glass doors. But I was standing still, watching. He didn't react at first, just scanned the document, probably expecting it to be some kind of personalized thank you note or commemorative letter. Then he saw the header. Notice of discharge, forged financial instrument, and the red stamp below it. Voided. Under investigation. He kept reading, slower this time. His brows furrowed. And then he saw the handwritten note. Just 6 words. Funny how the truth always wins. That was when his hands started to shake. He turned to my mother, who had just pulled her own envelope out. Her face went pale the moment she opened it. She looked up at him, at me, at the room, and suddenly I could see it. That tight, coiled composure she'd worn like armor all her life, beginning to crack. Noah leaned over her shoulder, scanning the contents. He looked like he'd been punched. And Claire wasn't even trying to hide her tears anymore. The trap had been sprung. The net was already tightening. And I didn't have to lift a single finger. Because here's the thing about revenge, the best kind doesn't roar. It echoes. 3 days later, a process server arrived at their home. He handed my father a formal notice, not just of the ongoing investigation, but of the civil suit now filed in my name. I wasn't pursuing jail time. Not officially. But the damages, emotional, financial, reputational, had been itemized by my legal team down to the decimal. The amount? $482,000. It included projected business losses, legal fees, emotional distress, and punitive damages for the forged mortgage and identity fraud. My lawyer called it a strategic sledgehammer. He was right. My father tried to call me. I didn't answer. He tried again. Then again. Eventually, he left a voicemail. Just one. It was breathless. Quiet. Like he was sitting in his study, late at night, the weight of everything finally pressing down on his chest. Asher, he said, I know you're angry. I don't blame you. Your mother's not well. She didn't know. And look, maybe I made mistakes, but we're family. You don't destroy family. You don't turn your back on your own blood. There was a long silence before the last line. I didn't know you'd go this far. I listened to it once, then deleted it, because he was the one who went too far. Years ago, when he let his son believe he was worthless, when he told him he wasn't built for success, when he bet the entire family's future on the golden child and buried the one who quietly built an empire. He didn't lose a son. He threw one away, and I was done making excuses for it. The court proceedings never made the papers. I wasn't interested in a public takedown. I didn't need the drama, just the distance. The consequences. We settled a few months later. My father didn't fight it. He didn't have the legal strength or the money anymore. Noah's legal troubles had drained most of their assets, and the firm? It collapsed after the embezzlement case. A few clients stayed, out of loyalty or pity, but the reputation was ruined. No one wants to be represented by lawyers under federal audit. They sold the house, the one I grew up in, the one where I sat quietly at dinner while Noah told stories and Dad nodded like he was reciting Shakespeare. The one where I stopped bringing home report cards because your brothers got enough awards for both of you. Gone. Foreclosed. Auctioned. I found out through public records. My father and mother moved into a condo, modest, gray, nothing like the manicured suburb they once lorded over like royalty. I don't know where Noah ended up. Claire filed for separation shortly after the scandal broke, citing irreconcilable breaches of trust. She emailed me once. A single sentence. "I wish you'd been my brother instead." I never replied. Not because I didn't care, but because I had finally learned the difference between people who see your light and people who only come looking when theirs burns out. It's been a year. My agency is thriving. We opened a third location. I started a mentorship program for young designers from underprivileged backgrounds, the kind of kids who hear you're not built for success and believe it. I make sure they unlearn that. I bought a house, not because I needed one, but because I wanted something that was mine. Walls I could hang my art on. A kitchen where silence didn't feel like punishment. A view that reminded me how far I'd come. Sometimes, on cold mornings, I walk out to the deck with a cup of coffee and just stand there. No music, no phone, just quiet. But not the kind I grew up with. This silence is peaceful. It belongs to me. And every now and then, I think about that day in the office lobby, when my father showed up, wilted and whispering, "Please." I didn't know it would turn out like this. He was wrong. Because I did. I always knew. And I built it anyway. Brick by painful brick. With every silent meal. With every insult dressed as advice. With every missed birthday. Every cold stare. Every "you're not enough." I built it from the ground up. Alone, but not broken. And in the end, I didn't need their apology. I didn't need their respect. Because I had something far more powerful. I had the last word.